Do the million with an NDA and restrict the offer to whoever the he's advising.
With an NDA.
What's an NDA?
It means you can't disclose the settlement or the amount of the settlement with anyone, including other family members.
That was a quick explanation of the basics of non-disclosure agreements, courtesy of the TV show Landman. And while NDAs are common in corporate America, Donald Trump now wants to impose them on the federal workers whose salaries you pay. In my latest piece for The Bulwark, I write about Trump's efforts to implement these kinds of gag orders for every single government worker employed throughout the federal government, pointing out that while the proposed rule says signing government-wide NDAs is voluntary, it concludes with a warning that employees can be fired and barred from future government jobs if they do not sign. The gag orders would be effective even after civil servants have left government employment for 5 years post-departure, and violations come with the threat of criminal charges. In short, in all but name, it would be a loyalty oath to Donald Trump. Still with us is Judge Shira Shenlin. So, Judge, there are already laws on the books prohibiting government employees from disclosing classified information or confidential private administrative records like tax records, as an example, or health records. What purpose do you think it is intended to serve to have government employees sign an NDA on top of those laws?
The answer is no legitimate purpose. The purpose of this is to intimidate and deter. What the purpose is, in my opinion, is to make government employees afraid to complain, afraid to point out abuse in their departments, afraid to come forward and reveal to the rest of us what's going on inside our government. That seems to be the real purpose. It's to shut them down. So it's really impinging on their First Amendment rights. It's impinging on the right of an employee who sees something wrong to speak about it. It's another very bad idea, in my opinion.
So how can they keep their rights as whistleblowers if such an NDA is in place? It seems like this couldn't be legal just in terms of basic freedom of speech that Americans have.
It's a good question, the way you framed it. I mean, you do have First Amendment rights for sure, and there's whistleblower protection, but I think this is sort of meant to deter you from even being a whistleblower. And there are statistics, which I think I read in the article that you cited, your article, that said most employees now are afraid to speak out. Only about 20% would even make such an allegation these days, whereas in the past, it would have been, I don't know, 70, 80% would trust.
We actually have those numbers.
You do.
I believe,
you do. I think it's
available.
20, 20.
That show that a recent survey. So this is a survey that's conducted every year, asking federal workers if they're confident they could report violations of law, for example, without retaliation. Only about a fifth, 22%, said yes, down from 72% the prior year. In 2024, that number is lower at some key agencies. It's all, we don't have it shown here, but it's really, really low in places like ICE and CBP, places where there's allegations of rampant law breaking. In those agencies, people are really afraid to report law breaking because they think they're going to get retaliated.
That's right. And so that's the real answer to your question. You can still be a whistleblower, but do you want to? You might risk your future profession for a long, long time.
And this speaks to this idea, this New York Times piece, big investigation about how I mean, this is an insane quote. The departure of more than 10,000 federal lawyers has left some agencies without sufficient staff. Donald Trump read it and truthed about it. There we have a truth. It's here. The New York Times wrote a story entitled "Trump Administration Sees Exodus of Legal Talent." Talk to us about how these things are sort of connected, right?
Oh, I think they are. I think these lawyers say, this is not a place I want to work because I have an oath that I have to keep. And I don't want to get in trouble with the judge by not being candid. Given our last conversation, these lawyers weren't candid when they talked about there was no settlement, and then there was a settlement. So the lawyers are being asked to do things that violate their oath as lawyers and could get them disciplined or even disbarred. They're not happy, and it's not good for their resume, frankly. They don't want to be known as a part of the Trump administration, I think. So the fact that 10,000 lawyers have left, many of them, as you know, have gone to state attorney generals, pretty much in blue states, admittedly, but they have gone to state AGs to continue doing what they like to do and important work. But they don't want to be there.
And in the reporting, it says that young lawyers don't want to even do internships.
That's, again, for the same reason. That's not the first line on their resume. I work for the Trump DOJ. No, because nobody thinks that DOJ is candid and honest any longer.
But if you're the Trump administration, I think this is a feature, not a bug, right? Yeah. They're glad that
killing the administrative state.
Yeah, the deep state, the administrative state, for the same reason that they're asking people to sign these NDAs. They're already firing people who are not departing of their own volition. I think we have a list of at least some of the sources, independent sources of accountability. They fired the head of the Office of Special Counsel, at least 21 inspectors general, the head of the Office of Government Ethics. They want this purge, no?
Yes and no. They need to staff the Department of Justice. They need to staff the other agencies that you just had on the screen. And they're having trouble recruiting enough lawyers to do the job, to get into court, to either prosecute or defend the cases. So in that sense, I understand your point. But at the same time, you're right. They have fired everybody they thought had ever brought a case against the Trump administration. So, for example, the January 6th prosecutors were just filed. In fact, one of them is the named plaintiff in that Eastern District of Virginia case attacking the fund because he was fired. So that's so interesting to me that that's one of the named plaintiffs. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and they can't get stuff done. If they don't have the lawyers, they can't do the job.
Well, that's right. That's right. We lawyers do have a job in life, and you need people to do it. They're having trouble recruiting. In fact, I read somewhere they were offering bonuses now to try to recruit people for the jobs, and people aren't coming forward. They really don't want to work there.
Well, it puts them in a very difficult position, right? In some cases, they might be asked to break their oath as attorneys, maybe their oath to the Constitution. If they report, I think sometimes about that lawyer who, I guess, maybe inadvertently, according to the administration, reported that somebody had been sent to CCOT, the detention center, who wasn't supposed to be there and acknowledged it to a judge. And I think that person either got forced out or resigned themselves. But in any event, if they do their job honestly, they get in trouble. So.
Yes.
Thank you, Judge Shira Scheindlin.